Hello, and thank you for joining me for another session of Biblical Explorations with Pastor Paul. Today we're going to be talking about a feature of the Holy Land that many people know about. It's Lake Tiberias, Kinneret, or Kinnereth. It's a freshwater lake in Israel. You probably know it better by its biblical name, its New Testament name I should say, the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is the lowest freshwater lake on earth, and the second lowest lake in the world after the Dead Sea, which is a saltwater lake, at levels between 705 and 686 feet below sea level. It's approximately 33 miles in circumference, about 13 miles long and 8.1 miles wide. Its area is 64.4 square miles at its fullest, and its maximum depth is approximately 141 feet. The lake is fed partially by underground streams, but also its main source of water is the Jordan River, which flows through it from the north to the south and exits the sea at the Dengania Dam. Obviously the Dengania Dam was not there in antiquity, but that's the description for today. We're going to explore the Sea of Galilee a little bit, look at its topography, the area around it, the place that it played in the ancient world as far as settlement and cities and stuff that developed, and also its place in the biblical narrative, especially in the New Testament and in the ministry of Jesus Christ. Welcome to Biblical Explorations with Pastor Paul, and thank you for coming to join me on this journey. This image shows the Sea of Galilee in relation to the major cities of Jesus' day. In the north is Caesarea Philippi near Damascus. Below is the Sea of Galilee with Capernaum on its northern shore. That was the base of Jesus' ministry. Below Capernaum is Nazareth, Mary's home and the place where Jesus grew up. Far to the south is Jerusalem and Bethlehem, Jesus' birthplace. This map shows the Jordan River going into the Sea of Galilee and then flowing out of the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. As I mentioned earlier, the lake has had several different names over history. It's been called by those names depending on what the dominant settlement on the shores of the lake was. The changing fate of the towns changed the name of the lake as well. One of the most common is the Sea of Kinneret. It's the modern Hebrew name for Kinneret. It comes from the Hebrew Bible, which is the main source, of course, of our Old Testament. The name appears as the Sea of Kinneret in both Numbers and Joshua. Now it's not spelled K-I-N-N-E-R-E-T there. In those it's spelled K-I-N-N-E-R-O-T in Hebrew in Joshua. This name was also found in the scripts of Ugarit in the Aghat epic as the name of a city. Kinneret was listed among the fenced cities in Joshua. A persistent, though unlikely, erroneous popular etymology of the name presumes that the name Kinneret may have originated from the Hebrew word kinnor, which means harp or lyre, because the shape of the lake was similar to a harp. The scholarly consensus, however, is that the origin of the name is derived from the important Bronze and Iron Age city of Kinneret. That was excavated at Tel El Orimen. The city of Kinneret may have been named after the body of water rather than vice versa. And there is no evidence for the origin of the name of the town. An additional name that is known for the lake is the Lake of Gennesaret. Again, another one that appears in both the Old and New Testaments, using the term sea. And the Hebrew is Diam. With the exception of Luke, who calls it the Lake of Gennesaret. A third name that the lake has been known by is Sea of Gennesaret. The Babylonian Talmud, as well as Flavius Josephus, mentions the sea by the name of the Sea of Gennesaret, after the small fertile plain of Gennesaret that lies on its western side. Gennesaret is yet another name derived from Kinneret. And finally, the Sea of Galilee, or Sea of Tiberias, aka Tiberias, in the New Testament. The term Sea of Galilee is used in the Gospel of Matthew, in the 4th chapter, the 15th chapter, in the Gospel of Mark, the 1st chapter and 7th chapter, and in the Gospel of John in the 6th chapter, as the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and the late 1st century name. Sea of Tiberias is also the name mentioned in Roman texts and in the Jerusalem Talmud, and it was adopted into Aramaic as Boyaret, Tiberia, meaning Lake Tiberias. Sea of Minya was an additional name. It's from the Umayyad through the Mamluk period. The lake was known in Arabic as Bahr al-Minya, the Sea of Minya, after Umayyad Khazar complex, whose ruins are still visible. This is the name used, or the name that was used, by medieval Persian and Arab scholars. Al-Bahudir and Al-Taberi and Ibn Kathar. But we know it as the Sea of Galilee. This image from Google Maps is a current day view of the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan River can be seen coming in at the top and going out at the bottom. Biblical towns like Nazareth can be seen in this map. Some are prosperous current day towns like Nazareth. Some are not, like Capernaum at the top of the lake. Also, what can be seen is on the right side of the lake, which is the eastern side, there are hills and mountains that come down to the lake, again, the lowest lake, freshwater lake in the world. Winds rushing down those mountains onto the lake cause fierce storms, as we saw talked about in the Gospels. That map image that we just saw showed the area where Jesus spent his entire life. The records in the Gospels and the stories in Acts, as well as letters, tell us that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, traveled north to Nazareth, began his ministry in Capernaum, and traveled to Jerusalem several times during his life here on earth. That map shows the entire area that Jesus spent his earthly life in. Now, there are some traditions that say, because of similarities in teaching, that during that period from 12 years old to 30, that we don't have any information about Jesus' life, that he went to India and taught and learned there, but there is no evidence of that. And I believe that if there are similarities in teaching about God's love and how God interacts with people, it is evidence of the existence of God and God's creation of all the peoples of the earth, rather than some other kind of theory for which there is no evidence. But it was these places shown in that map where the stories that we have heard since we were young of Jesus' various ministries occurred. The healing stories, the feeding stories, the walking on water, the teaching in the temple, all of these kind of things were in that map, and the vast majority of them were contained in the area of Galilee, in the immediate vicinity of the Sea of Galilee. This image depicts Jesus turning water into wine at the wedding at Cana of Galilee. In the background, you see the bride and groom. And in the foreground are the large vases, the large containers that were used for ritual cleansing. Jesus told the servant to fill them up, and when he drew some water out, it was no longer water, but wine. This happened in the town of Cana, in the west of Galilee. This painting shows us Jesus calling his first disciples. The Gospels tell us they were at their boats mending their nets when Jesus called them and said, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." We see the Sea of Galilee right behind them, and the birds around, and a number of people, because there would have been a number of boats. We see a second boat on the left side. This picture is of a recreated synagogue of Jesus' time. It's located in a recreation of the historical village of Nazareth, with recreations done based on the best available archaeological evidence. This is likely what the synagogue that Jesus went to when he was a child and where he preached in the beginning of Luke's gospel when he was rejected in his hometown. This painting shows Jesus teaching, as recorded in Matthew chapter 5 and following. Jesus went up on the mountain and sat down and began to teach them. In that culture, when you were to teach, you would sit down rather than stand as today. And here we see people looking to and listening to the seat of Jesus as he gives his most complete sermon that we have recorded, the Sermon on the Mount. This image shows Jesus healing the Gerasene demoniac. When the demon came out of him, they begged Jesus not to send them into the abyss, but rather let them go into a herd of swine that was nearby. And Jesus gave them permission, and they went into the swine, and the swine ran down the steep hill into the lake and drowned themselves. This picture is a picture of the remains of a first century fishing boat. This boat was found in the Sea of Galilee when the water was down and has been carbon dated to the time of Jesus' life. It is referred to as the Jesus boat. There is no evidence or connection of this boat directly to Jesus, but it would have been the same kind of boat his disciples would have used when they were on the Sea of Galilee, and where he stilled the waves and enabled the miraculous catch of fish. Each and every one of these pictures, miracle stories, feeding stories, Jesus in the synagogue, they all took place in the area around the Sea of Galilee. Some in Nazareth, some at Bethsaida, some at Capernaum, but they were all right around the Sea of Galilee. I didn't include pictures of Jesus walking on the water or stilling the storms. These also are very familiar stories that we've all heard. Galilee was where Jesus' ministry was located. It was his hometown. He came from Nazareth, but he moved to Capernaum. And while in Capernaum, his ministry flourished and went from there. The place where he was where he did his ministries. He used the resources that were there. If God was going to come to earth and he was going to get some people to help him in his ministry, what would you expect him to get? Learned men, people with degrees in public speaking, knowledgeable people, people with wealth and power so they can fund the ministries. These are the kind of things that we might think that God would select in the people that he calls. But Jesus looked at the heart of the people, and took simple people from Galilee. Later on in his ministry, when the disciples are teaching, and they're talking in all this wisdom, the people were there saying, how can these men be saying such things? Aren't they from Galilee? That backwater town? That small little area? Nothing good comes out of there. Jesus flourished where he was. He used what was where he was, what was available, and used it for his purposes. As followers of Jesus Christ, you and I are called to do the same thing. To use the things that are in our area, where we are planted, and use them in service of God, to make a difference in this world. During this pandemic time, we struggle with how do we go about doing ministry? How do we do the things that we are called to do? What is it that we can do at these times when we're social distancing and quarantined at home and things of this nature? Well, look around, you'll find things in your houses. There are stories of people making masks, multiple layer masks for healthcare workers, delivering lunches and food to hospitals. My daughter-in-law is a healthcare worker over at Hackensack Meridian Hospital. And she regularly posts things that come to the hospital, thank you notes that are left outside for them, meals that have been sent over, things of that nature, which touches them deeply at their heart and gives them the strength to continue to go on. These are some of the kind of things that can be done. Other stories I've heard have been about people going and picking up medications for elderly who are self-quarantining. Food shopping. Oil changes for cars, getting cars washed. All these kind of things that need to be done, we can do even in the midst of a pandemic. And so, as we talked about the Sea of Galilee today, the effect it had on its area, fishing industry was one of the biggest. As a matter of fact, the fish that were caught there and cured with salt were shipped all over the known world at the time, even as far as Spain. This simple area of simple, hard-working people was able to change the world by using what was there and using it in the service of God. And so as we struggle through this pandemic, I put to you the same thing. Use what God has given you where you are to make a difference in this world for the sake of Jesus Christ. Well, again, I'd like to thank you for joining me for this most recent session of our Biblical Explorations with Pastor Paul. I hope you found this interesting. It was a little different than the prior ones in the temple. But we'll continue to do these as time goes on. And I hope you find them interesting. I hope you find them enlightening. And I hope they help you to connect to God in ways that you might not have before. Again, I call you to service by using what is where you are, to be in service to God and His people, that you and they might be blessed in the process.